Sir, welcome to Leadership Log, and thanks for joining us today. This is a podcast on topics of interest for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community. And today we are here to meet Colonel Kurian, who is the Chief of the Simulators Division, and is going to explain to us what your team does and how it benefits the Air Force. So, sir, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit and give us some of your background, how you came to be in the Air Force, and what your career has led you to so far.
Thanks, Gerald, for this opportunity to be here and go through this interview. So I'm Colonel John Kurian, the Senior Material Leader for the Simulators Division, which is out of the Agile Combat Support Directorate within Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. So I entered active duty in '98, received my commission out of the ROTC program at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And since then, I've had a number of assignments, beginning with the Air Force Weather Agency out at Offutt Air Force Base. Then I came here to write PAT at the Sensors Directorate for Air Force Research Lab. Mm-hmm. Then I did a stint in South Korea, working Intel Ops at Yongsan Army Garrison. And then the Air Force, I was an engineer, all of a sudden decided to take me to the Personnel Center to work acquisition assignments. From there, I went to school for a little bit for IDE, and then the National Reconnaissance Office out of Chantilly. And then I had several LCMC tours within the Battle Management Directorate, within LCMC XP, XP, mm-hmm. And then also worked a little bit of F-35 stuff and B-21. So I've been around the Air Force for a little bit, different organizations. I also had a deployment supporting OIR, Operation Inherent Resolve. And so I think overall I characterize my assignments as perhaps being a bit unique in terms of an acquisition officer working in weather and intel and personnel. Mm-hmm. So it's been a fun ride past 22 some years.
So, sir, you lead now the Simulators Division. Could you tell us a little bit about the team? Where is it located? What size is it? Just a little bit about their background.
Sure. Simulators, I think, I would say from my experience in the Air Force, it's the best organization to work in terms of the people that are here, true professionals, love what they do, and also our impact of the warfighter on an everyday basis. Mm-hmm. Organizationally, we are about a little over 550 folks, primarily out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so we support 9 different major commands, about 26 platform offices, 20 foreign partners in terms of simulators that we provide for different countries. So FMS is a big part of our portfolio that people don't recognize.
Sure.
So overall, I think as an organization here, in terms of what this organization does to provide training systems, ground-based training systems to the warfighter, it's a pretty critical mission. So other stats I would give you is, we don't have every single simulator within the Air Force, but over 2,700 devices are part of the systems that we actually support on an everyday basis. And these systems are at over 160 sites across the U.S. and around the world. Mm-hmm. And industry partners, we work with both big companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and then smaller companies like SimStar, DRG, mm-hmm. Small companies as well. So we have a good mix across the board with a variety of industry partners that are part of our mission set here.
Okay. Now, for people who don't understand what the purpose of simulators are, can you give us just a basic understanding? Why does the Air Force have simulators? What do we use them for? What benefit do we get from that?
Sure. I think at a very elementary level, simulators help an airman understand their job, try to make mistakes in a system without any safety incidents, and then to be able to do all these things in a cost-effective manner, compared to going to the real system and doing all these things. Certainly, especially in some of our weapon systems, there are high density or high demand, low density assets where you don't have as many aircrafts, for example, to be able to go train in. So simulators are very critical in terms of giving you the opportunity to do a lot of your training where you don't have access to the systems to go do it. The other part I would say for simulators is It's not, the people that we support are not just pilots. So, pilots are a part of it, but certainly we support maintainers in terms of systems that support them. We support air traffic controllers. We support load masters, TACPs. So the community is pretty broad in terms of, I would say, simulators and simulation technology that our organization provides. And the other part is, it's not just understanding your basic weapon system that you, or your system that you maintain or you operate, but also we provide the ability to network among simulators across the Air Force to be able to help you train how you fight. So we run the training networks. The Distributed Mission Operations Network is a big one that we end up running from our office. So that enables an operator sitting at, say, Nellis Air Force Base to connect with someone in Australia and be able to rehearse a particular mission. In other cases, perhaps for advanced tactics and development of those things or training against advanced threats, our current live ranges don't provide you that capability. Or you may want to do things that you don't want anyone else to observe. So that virtual world is a great place to be able to train for that type of environment. And organizations like the Virtual Warfare Center at Nellis are key stakeholders for us, where we provide them the capability to do those kinds of things.
So you're talking about you can train in environments, one, to have enhanced security, but also for safety purposes. Okay, so if you're going to, say, practice a refueling mission with an aircraft that you've never worked with before,
Right.
This could be an environment where you could do that.
Right. This certainly provides you the ability to be able to do those kind of things, make mistakes, try again several different times. In fact, I got to sit in a KC-46 boom operator position and try to refuel in Oklahoma. So those are the kinds of things I think the virtual environment gives you the opportunity to go do. And in other cases, I think it's difficult to replicate the threat environment and the complexity in our ranges. They don't have the space to be able to do those kind of things because a lot of our sensors are a lot more sophisticated. They're able to detect us at very far ranges. So current environment doesn't allow you to replicate that type of thing. So certainly the virtual environment gives you that capability.
And you mentioned that it's not just crews, so like maintainers can go in and they can practice doing removing a part on an aircraft in a virtual environment before they actually go out onto the flight line and do it for real.
Right, yeah, so certainly that community benefits a lot from our part task trainers or other systems where they can actually do their function, to include even in virtual reality, and goggles and, that type of capability. The other cool capability that I recently saw at Kurland Air Force Base is we had a C-130J that had some sort of a maintenance issue or some sort of a airworthiness issue, where AFSOC bought that system and gave it to us, and we used that as a back-end trainer for our loadmasters. So it's it's a no kidding aircraft. And then that aircraft was turned into a back-end trainer for our loadmasters. So it's not just simulation type technology, but we even have real hardware aircraft to be able to provide our trainers so that they can do that in our training system and then go to the real aircraft.
Yep. So, sir, obviously your program, your work cuts across a number of other programs. How do you work with the other directorates within LCMC or even within the warfighting community to make sure that when they're getting ready to field systems, that you've got your systems on board, that your timelines are matching with their timelines, and that the simulator that you're going to deliver meets the requirements that they have?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest challenges in terms of, given the scope of our portfolio, 70-some programs, a number of platform offices that we interact with in the MatchComs. How do you make sure all these things are orchestrated such that when an operator is ready to go into a system that they've had the requisite training? It's very challenging. So I think our relationship with these platform offices tends to vary a bit based on how closely coupled we are to their activities. For example, at one extreme, you can take KC-46, where it's in a development phase as well, where what's happening to the platform needs to be tightly coupled to what's happening to the sim. In that case, our IPTs are actually embedded in the program office. They report to the platform office on an everyday basis for how the system's being developed. So, and then our office really at my level, it's really more the organized, train, and equip and other functional expertise. We provide that advice. but the execution generally is run with Brigadier General Select Jason Lindsay.
Okay.
So that's a very tightly coupled, development approach where we're tied to them. In other cases, like T6, for example, you may not have a whole lot of modifications occurring on the platform. So we still rely on the platform office to help pump for the funding, but our IPTs work closely with them, but it's not as tightly coupled like the KC-46 example. But nonetheless, it's a difficult challenge, especially, given sometimes when platforms are going through major decisions, sometimes training systems fall low in the priority. So it's a constant dialogue with the platform office, with the MatchCom, with Half A3 to make sure, our activities are synchronized.
Right. What are some of the exciting new trends that are coming along in the simulators world?
So as far as, I think the biggest one I would say is, we see a lot of commercial technology that's rapidly being developed, where we see application for some of that within the simulator world. I watch my son play Fortnite, and I see all of his friends, especially during COVID, all playing together, communicating, working one mission. So I was like, hey, that's a kind of gaming technology and those capabilities, perhaps not at that level of fidelity, but much higher fidelity is what we need. How do we take, those trends that we see in commercial industry and within under a 3-year period, transition that to, the simulator enterprise at large? So we do have an innovation cell that Margaret Merkel and other team members are leading, working with our commercial partners, figuring out which technologies show promise so that we can rapidly transition to us. So that's a pretty exciting field that we've been working on. And within our own portfolio, the other trend is, we've over time, a lot of our training systems have been stovepiped, where they have their own development strategy over time, where to try to integrate them has been a big challenge. So our Simulator Common Architecture Requirements Standards Program, SCARS, is a real big initiative in terms of trying to horizontally integrate across these platforms, so that when you have a cyber patch, for example, that you need to push out to everyone, it's more streamlined. Right. So we're in the early phases going and implementing that. The subsequent phases will look at other open architecture concepts in terms of threat systems, where we're not, each system's not buying their own thing, that we're able to provide that environment and then push it out to the individual simulators. So that's another exciting area. Then artificial intelligence and other areas are still in the early phase as far as application here, but they do show promise, and we're trying to figure out how do we take those kind of capabilities to figure out how well students are learning, how to help with their decision-making process for a pilot when there's a lot of different data coming in. So those are still in the early phases of trying to understand how best do we apply it in our environment.
You mentioned security, and I would imagine cybersecurity is a big concern, or area of interest, especially on network systems and things like that. What exactly are you doing to make sure that you bake in cybersecurity from the beginning?
So I think a lot of our efforts right now in these systems have been more, a lot of our portfolio is, in the sustainment phase. So it's really trying to make sure first we have a good understanding of what the cyber posture is, and trying to make sure that the RMF, risk management framework is applied across the board. So right now it's really getting a good understanding of what that baseline looks like across the enterprise at large. And then, then after that, to be able to automate some of the functions which are being manually done, and then to have an enterprise-wide perspective on what the cyber posture looks like. So those are some of the, some of the initiatives that are under SCARS right now. And then to be able to try to make sure everyone's on the same set of standards, as far as cybersecurity is concerned.
You mentioned the gaming community, and I think that's what most people think of when they think of simulators. That's the first thing that pops into their mind. What is your organization doing to reach out to non-traditional companies? I know you said that you work with the major defense contractors, but you also work with some smaller companies too. How do you reach out to these non-traditionals that normally would never think of doing business with the government?
Yeah, so I think so we have the innovation cell that's kind of our focal point to be able to reach out to a lot of the non-traditional companies. We leverage the AFWorks process and CBER's funding to be able to initiate, at least begin some contracts with non-traditional companies. So in 2019, we awarded about 6 contracts to small businesses, and 2020 we awarded another 10. So I think on 2019 it was about 6 million. This year was 10 million. So the thought is really to take, try to work with these smaller businesses and figure out which technologies are promising, to work with our MAGCOMs to give us some commitment to say they're actually interested in that depending on the outcome. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And we've leveraged the NTSA, ITSIC, and TSIS and other industry forums as our main avenue to be able to broadcast our message to a lot of our industry partners. Mm-hmm. So as we've leveraged those forums, we've come across a number of companies that typically we have not dealt with in the past. Right. So it's been about a couple of years of doing this. I think in my 3 years here, hopefully we'll successfully transition at least one or two of these technologies to our training systems.
So you go to a lot of these forums, and companies can have an opportunity to come forward and show you what they've got, and you can maybe make an assessment as to whether or not that's something that you could benefit from.
Right. So we certainly have those type of opportunities. These venues allow us to interact with these companies. And then as part of our pitch day processes, they do release RFPs, requests for proposals. Mm-hmm. I think for the 2021, we received about 40 proposals from companies. Wow. And then as we held our virtual ITSIC, we showed a number of the pitches or videos, just like Shark Tank, mm-hmm. To our audience. And especially I targeted our platform, I targeted our industry partners that are actually maintaining our platforms right now to say, hey, we're interested in some of these technologies. I want you to think about which ones are promising for the platform and work with us to bake in the abilities that we need. So as we have this 1 or 2 year process with a small business, we're trying to get our industry primes to work with us to such that we can figure out how do you bake in cyber, how do you bake in the other things that are needed, and then transition this to a system that they're maintaining. Mm-hmm. So it's still a year or two into that process. So I'm challenging everyone to say, hey, be the first one to transition something.
Right. What about intellectual property? Is that a challenge that you face a lot of times you said that some of the systems that you have are stovepiped, and so sometimes bringing in new players to work on that system can be a challenge in terms of who owns the data.
Yeah, certainly intellectual property data rights is a big challenge for us. And these systems were built maybe several decades ago. At this stage, trying to add new capability, a new app, for example, mm-hmm. is a major challenge depending on what system it is. So part of our SCARs thought process is to be able to get our industry partners to conform to a common set of standards and interfaces, such that when we're ready to go ahead and put a new app in there, that it's a lot easier. So currently there is tight coupling between the platform and the SIM in some cases, mm-hmm. and we're working through, working with a consortium of industry partners to say, how can we navigate through some of the challenges that we have? So it's an ongoing challenge for us.
Yeah. So sir, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time, but before we close up, is there anything that I've forgotten to ask you about or anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think you've kind of covered a whole set of issues on here. I think what I'd add is, I've been here for about 10 months, and truly I've really enjoyed the mission here in terms of daily impact of the warfighter to make sure they're ready for that next fight. And then I've really enjoyed the people here in this organization. Majority of them have been here for a number of years. We have a good mix of folks that have been here for 10 plus years. And in other cases, it's a training ground for a lot of our new palace acquires, mm-hmm. where there's a lot of blocking and tackling, what happens at the program office that's occurring here. So they get to learn what it means to run contracts, or program managers in such a big basket spo here, they get to run their programs. So I think it's an exciting place to work. It's a fast-paced organization. So that ops tempo, and the mission's been certainly rewarding for me personally here.
Sir, thanks very much for joining us today on Leadership Log.
Thank you.